Okay, it's 1500 CET. Let's start. Hello from the Deutsche Welle Academy in Berlin, and thank you very much for joining today's live session in our Digital Safety for Journalists series. My name is Guy Deegan, and I'm your host for the workshop. Today we'll be discussing digital footprints and the data trail we leave when we're using the internet or mobile devices. And with us here in Berlin to talk about that is Anne Roth, who is a program researcher and editor with the Tactical Technology Collective, an NGO that is dedicated to the use of information for activism and also promotes digital security. And you can find them online at tacticaltech.org. Hi, Anne. Welcome and thank you very much for joining us here at DW Academy.
Hello.
Okay, it's good to see that we have the training room filling up, but before we begin our talk with Anne, let me just point out an important feature of the Adobe Connect online training room. You'll see underneath the video windows that we have a chat room, and that's where you can ask questions during the workshop or post comments and suggestions. And you'll also see that our DW Academy colleagues, Stefan and Thomas, will be active on the chat room. Don't forget, our Twitter handle is at DW_Academy, and the workshop hashtag is DigiSafe. So if you're following the conversation on Twitter, please use the DigiSafe hashtag. And we had a participant yesterday tweeting in Spanish during yesterday's talk. That's great stuff. Thank you very, very much. And we appreciate anyone who's sharing what they're learning here in the training room with their social media network. As for the format, we have up to 1 hour for this workshop, and we'll keep the format quite straightforward. We're going to first sketch out what is digital safety and our digital footprint, and then Anne is going to show us some methods and tools for staying safe online and being smarter with our data. In between, of course, we can take your questions where possible. So let's start by meeting our guest, Anne Roth. And you were on our digital safety panel discussion at the beginning of this week. Our video is now online. It's on our blog, and I urge everyone to watch it. But can we begin by asking you, what does digital safety mean to you, and particularly the people you work with?
Well, digital safety basically is a term that describes how we can secure our online communication, that being for most of us email, but also using a browser to surf the internet, maybe also for chatting, which many people use the browser for, but there's also other means. And the importance of that basically can be described in the need for privacy that we all have. Professionally or privately. I think journalists very well understand why, for example, protecting sources is very important. It used to be maybe a question of personal integrity, how you protect a source if you didn't give away someone's name. If we look back at something very important as the Watergate scandal and not being able to find out who was actually leaking that information. These days, probably something like email communication would have played a role. And so I think digital security helps people secure what used to only be a question of personal integrity.
I mean, of late, of course, with the revelations from Edward Snowden about the US National Security Agency's internet surveillance activities with PRISM and the surveillance conducted by other intelligence services, internet privacy is very much in the spotlight. What would you describe as our digital footprint, and what sort of risks to our privacy are we potentially encountering when we go online or use a mobile device?
I think when we look at the digital footprint, we need to ask ourselves the question, who would be interested in our digital footprint? Why would it actually be a problem to have a digital footprint? And with the leaks by Edward Snowden, most of us now are aware that authorities like or secret services like the NSA can be a huge problem and are collecting everybody's data. And at the same time, we're also facing companies who want to find out who we are, because they want to sell advertisements, and for that reason build huge profiles about us to be able to direct advertisements at us that actually fit, which in itself might not be such a bad thing, but the fact that there are these profiles about us that actually have a lot of information that we have no control over is for different reasons a problem. And then again, also we have heard in the last half year that at least when it comes to American companies, this information probably goes straight to the NSA as well. So that might be a problem as well. So I think it's important that we understand how we create these digital footprints by our own behavior on the web, how the tools that we use, how the hardware that we use also helps increase our digital footprint. And sometimes there's not so much we can do about it. Sometimes also it's really difficult to avoid being tracked by a secret service like the NSA. But I think there's a lot of things that we can do and that are really worthwhile getting into.
Okay, you've got a suite of tools and applications to show us through the Me and My Shadow website, which is run by the Tactical Technology Collective. We're going to start sharing your screen, so I'll ask you to engage that now. And while Anne's doing that, it'll take just a few seconds to start up. And if you could then start to explain to us what is My Shadow, and briefly explain to us the sort of tools that you'd like to demonstrate for us today.
Okay, I hope this is working now. I've attempted at least to share my screen with you all. I'm new to Adobe Connect as well, so it's as new to me as to probably many of the users out there. Could someone?
I'll just point out to people that if you're using Adobe Connect for the first time, you'll see that from your screen you can press full screen, and you can actually make the screen that which Anne is sharing full size.
Okay, so is it possible now for users to see the Me and My Shadow website?
Yes, it looks like we are definitely sharing your screen.
Okay, great. Me and My Shadow, as was described just now, is a website that's run by the Tactical Technology Collective, which is an NGO that works hard at securing human rights defenders and journalists and activists' communication. And this is the attempt to help people understand about the digital traces that we leave when we go online. And we have a visualization that helps with that, which you can see at the top here. It's called Trace My Shadow, and I'm clicking that now to show it to you. And once that comes up, as you can see here, you have the option of actually choosing which how you go online, what you do online, which devices you actually use, and I'll walk through a number of these. Of course, it's not going to be possible to address every possible device or use of the internet, but maybe by showing some of these, we can help understand a little how you can find out what your traces are and what you can do about them. So assuming that we all use a computer, I think otherwise it would probably be very difficult for you to follow us at this point. I'm assuming that maybe we're using a Windows computer, and so we can check this little box here. And by checking that, as you can see, now I've unticked it, checking again, you can see a number of traces appearing here in the big column in the center. And you can actually see by clicking on the computer right here on the left that these are the traces that you already start leaving by having or using a computer. And just for an example, there's a bunch of traces that come just through the hardware, the manufacturer registration, because you have bought the computer probably somewhere, or if not you, then maybe your employer. In that case, it would be a trace that your employer is leaving, because normally you would be leaving name and address when you buy something, or credit card information, as you can see here. And when you start using the computer, you very likely, one of the first questions you will be asked is one like, what language are you using? And when you would like to find out actually that why would that be a trace? What does that give away about me? We can click on the little sign language over here, and then you will find a bit more information about the trace language. And this is the same for the many things that you can find on this website that I invite you also to explore more in detail and with a bit more time when we're through with this workshop. And so here's just a few examples about what this actually does. As you can see, using a language is something, or changing your language setting is something that is being transmitted and checked by the servers of the websites that you serve to. They collect a bunch of information about you, and the language setting is usually one that is always being transmitted. When the language setting, which is usually per default English, is changed to something that is more unique, that increases what is called the browser fingerprint, which is something that is actually quite interesting to many servers, because the browser fingerprint is comprised of so much detailed different information that almost any browser can be identified just through this. To see a little bit more about what you give away through using a browser that is not having any add-ons to protect the details, I would like to point you to an external resource, which is called IPcheck, as we can see here. And when we click on that, we open this, we get to a page that has a bit more information about what IPcheck actually is. It's an anonymity test. It shows you, as an example, about the many information that can be found when you browse from the server of the website that you go to. And when you click on this, we get to the IPcheck website. And the IPcheck website is doing two things. It tells me about my IP address, which is an address that is used to identify me for my internet provider, which for technical reasons, to be able to actually give me the information that I am looking for on the internet, needs to identify my computer. And this is called the IP address. And you can see that through the IPcheck. But you can also see a lot more, and you can do a full anonymity test, which is what I'm doing now by clicking Start Test, and then we can find out a little more. This is going to take a little while. Okay, now the test is still happening, but we can already see quite a bit of information, which is what others can see about us when we surf to their website. They can see through the IP my location. I'm in Berlin at the moment. The net provider of Deutsche Welle is where I am at the moment, is the Deutsche Telekom. And this in more detail. And down here we can see, and this is conveniently done in different colors to show us whether this is an okay setting. For example, here language is green. It's American English, which is what most people are using, or not most people, or a lot of people are using, so it doesn't give away a lot of information about us. It has as a setting the do not track setting activated, which is something you can activate or deactivate in the settings of your Firefox browser, assuming that you're using a Firefox browser like we are at the moment. And this is good because it avoids that ad companies who want to find out more about us can do detailed tracking, but also there's a bunch of other information which I would invite you to maybe check for your own browser to see whether you can come up with a predominantly red or maybe orange or maybe green color for the many details. And then when clicking here, you can read a bit more about why that might be getting this this red color over here. So there's a lot of information, and maybe that helps understand a bit why a browser fingerprint can actually give away a lot of information about you.
And just a quick question, because we've got more people joining us in the room. In running this sort of quick analysis, what particular points there, really sort of ring alarm bells with you that, these are the points you really need to concentrate on with checking what your browser is up to?
I think the overall information given away about you is really what comes to play in here. That we are getting quite a bit of red in here, meaning this information. This is something that I think should be changed. Is that the browser is accepting cookies, which is something that we're going to get into a bit later, maybe. That it does not use an encrypted connection to the server, it's an HTTP session and is not using HTTPS. On the other hand, I think these settings are really quite nice. And then also the browser accepts flash cookies, which is a different type of cookies, which is something that really should be turned off probably. Because flash cookies for a different reason for tracking, but also for possibly for means that there's you have flash activated, which could also insert malware into your computer. The flash pair is I don't know why that's getting an orange right here now. We would need a plugin to display that, meaning maybe the plugin is being blocked at the moment by one of the add-ons that we have, which is actually quite a good sign, even though it looks like it could be a bug, but actually it isn't.
And just very quickly, this is a very basic question, but do you have any personal recommendations over, a good browser to use?
Yeah, we totally recommend everyone to use the Firefox browser, which is by the Mozilla Foundation, and it's an open source browser, meaning it's not a company that in itself wants to track information or sell information, but instead is interested in the privacy of the users. So the Firefox browser is open source, which makes it possible to actually check, maybe not for most users, but there are people who go look after these things to check that there is no hidden something in there that shouldn't be in a browser that gives away information about you. And also for Firefox, you can find a lot of add-ons that you can install, which help you protect your privacy. And most of these add-ons exist for Firefox.
Great, thanks, Anne. And so far, just to quickly bring people up who have just joined us, we're looking at myshadow.org, which is from Tactical Technology Collective, and we've been going through Trace My Shadow within that suite of tools.
Exactly, and that's where we're back now. Switching back to the tab for me and my shadow and the language setting. Another external resource that I would just like to quickly point is the Data Dealer, which is actually an educational game that I invite everyone to maybe check out after the session, which tells you a lot about who is actually interested in collecting your data and how companies can make money by collecting things about you that seem to not be sensitive information at all, but once you've spent maybe 10 minutes with a data dealer, you might understand a bit better why you should really take care to not give away anything for free that is actually yours. Okay, so I'm going to close the language box here. And the next thing that I would like to look at is we already checked the thing over here saying we have a Windows machine, a Windows operating system on the computer that we use. And one thing that you can see over here, which might seem confusing at first, is that your Windows operating system has a MAC address. And most people would associate that with an Apple computer, but in fact, MAC address is an acronym for Media Access Control. And we'll find out a bit more about that. The media access control is an ID that is associated with a piece of hardware in your computer or even mobile phone, and will generally be transmitted when you go online. Again, to both your service provider, probably your again, the website that you connect to or the other services that you're using. And so I think it's really important to be aware that there are these hardware component identification methods, different ones of them, and the MAC address being just one, that even if you would try to hide your identity by maybe using a different browser or using a different email address or creating a new email address by going somewhere, your MAC address is very likely going to identify you anyways. Of course, not every server who would like to find out who you are knows who you are just by having your MAC address. But then there's also the option to keep, like if once you log into, for example, a Facebook account and you use your real name and birthday maybe, and there is a connection to your MAC address, and then you maybe log into a different service or your Google account or any other kind of account, your MAC address is very likely going to be stored together with that information. And like I explained in the beginning, there is a huge interest to build profiles with as much information as possible, if only to sell those profiles to the companies or give away details of these profiles to companies who would like to place ads, which is the huge market to which like tracking and the internet matters at the moment. And there, of course, again, why would it be a problem if an ad company has a profile about me and knows where I live and whether I use a Windows computer and that I have a Facebook account? But then again, as we heard through the leaks of the last half year, once it's a US company, it's impossible to know whether the NSA also has the access to the same information, and then maybe other secret services of other countries as well. And so coming back to the MAC address, it's possible to change your MAC address. It's not easy, and I would just like to point out there's some tips here that you can see here, which once you click on the titles of these, you will find a bit more information. And I would just like to quickly show the Technician MAC address changer, which is only for Windows. So Mac users, Apple users, or Linux users would not be able to use that. And once you open this, you will find a bit more information, and all the tools that we present through the Me and My Shadow website have a bit of information about what this tool actually is, where you can find it, what you can use it for, in this case all Windows versions. It has a bit of license information. It shows you where to find more information and whether this is something that beginners could use or people would have a bit more of advanced information, which in this case, I have to say that changing a MAC address is not a trivial process. So it's not something you might want to try first when you start getting into this topic.
Is there any disadvantage or drawback to changing your MAC address? For instance, you bring your computer into the shop to maybe some problem, and you want to use it's like a warranty issue or something like that, and they say, hey, you've changed your MAC address here, or is that irrelevant?
Well, it's not a physical thing, like it's not a number that's actually printed in your device. This is more on the software side of things, so that's not illegal to do. Of course, I'm not sure about the legal situation in all the countries in the world. There's lots of laws in many places, and I think in places with more restrictive legal situations, it's always worthwhile to maybe talk to other people, like and exchange information about these types of things. I would be surprised if changing the MAC address would be a problem. If you come to like email encryption like PGP, that's definitely something that is illegal in some countries, so that would always have to be checked whether you are allowed to do these things. But I think changing MAC address should not be a problem.
Maybe if we just also pause just very briefly, we've got a question here from a guest referring to if it is an American company gathering this sort of data. Can you see that question there, Anne?
Yeah, I can see that. Totally Right. Actually, that's true. We know that the NSA cooperates with many secret services in many other countries. Certainly the German Secret Service, definitely the GCHQ from the UK. And we've just recently had revelations that the Australian Secret Service cooperates. And I think we know that we don't know a lot yet. So it's totally right to assume that once the NSA knows, that many other secret services probably also know. I would think that a lot of other secret services don't have the technical capabilities the NSA has to track all of this knowledge. The UK one, yes, but the others we don't really know. But they do cooperate, and so we can safely assume that information these US companies collect will be or might be transferred to other countries as well. If we talk about companies from other countries, excuse me, yeah, I think the same problem exists. But then I think it is not such a most of them are just not so widely used as Facebook and Amazon and Google and Microsoft are, and that's why I'm mostly talking about these companies at the moment. But then, yeah, I think it's just as possible for the others.
Okay, and would you like a glass of water, just very quickly?
That would be great, yeah, thanks.
And we thank you. I'll come back on just to give you some company online. And suffering with a little bit of a cold, so we very much appreciate her coming in and spending a good hour with us talking. But we want you to survive this hour, Anne. So please, anytime you need to take
I'm
a
not
quick
doing
break,
so bad. I just
not
have this
a problem
cough.
at all. Okay. Okay. Would you like to take another question about? We have one about startpage.com and also about DuckDuckGo. And yeah, then we can come back to the next item that you wanted to raise. Or do you want to continue first with MAC address and address those questions after that?
I think I'm basically through with the MAC address changer. I invite everyone who's interested in more detail to read through the information that we provide online, but I wouldn't want to go into the process of actually doing a MAC address change here now. So I think that's okay. We can talk about search engines. There was Startpage and DuckDuckGo that were being mentioned, which are good alternatives to using the Google search. Maybe we can get into the why Google in general is a problem if with regards to digital traces, but just to quickly answer that, I think they're both good alternatives, and I would advise people to use those rather than the Google search.
Okay, so it's something that perhaps if you haven't had a look at, both startpage.com and DuckDuckGo as alternatives to Google search engine. Is that right?
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
I'm just checking that. So startpage.com and DuckDuckGo, worth looking into for alternatives to Google.
Yes, we do have DuckDuckGo also in the toolkit, which I'm going to show in the end, where you can find more of these kinds of tools. And Startpage is you could go into a philosophical debate about the differences and the advantages of each, but I think they're both good alternatives, yes.
Okay, I think you might also mention at the end something about Google services as well.
Yes.
Great. Okay, well then we look forward to that as well. Okay, we'll let you move on to the next item that you'd like to show us.
Okay, so the next thing I would like to move on to is most of us are using mobile phones, so that's another option for you to check. So we have mobile phones here, and already having a mobile phone and using that, of course, leaves a number of traces, and one of them that I would like to show you is the Imei. And the Imei is a hardware identification that is very similar to the MAC address, and Again, you can find a bit more information about this over here. And what's good to know about the IMEI, or important to know about the IMEI, is that there's actually not very much you can do about it. You can't change it. This is a number that identifies your hardware and is probably transmitted through most of the services that you use with your mobile phone. Certainly, when you use your phone to make phone calls. There's two important numbers actually that come with your phone. One is the one that identifies your hardware, which is this one, and the other which is used to identify the SIM card that you have in your phone, and that is, you can see that here in that information, the IMSI. No need to memorize those, but it's good to understand that there's these two pieces of information that can identify you. Most people probably have registered their phone in some way or another, but when you bought it, so that is connected to your phone, same as your SIM card. So if you would like to to make anonymous calls for whichever reason, it's not enough to just switch the SIM card. You would have to use a different hardware and a different SIM card at the same time if you want to make calls that are not being monitored by whoever. I think, again, looking at journalists who are protecting sources, and by what we know through the leaks now, when not even the German Chancellor's phone is protected from monitoring, it is a good idea to think of, for sensitive subjects, using a different phone with a different SIM card. Again, of course, I think leaving digital traces has a lot to do with technical details, but at the same time, it's always a good idea to look at the situation and the context in which you are behaving and what you are doing, because if you are afraid of being monitored, and then who can't be in these times, it might even be more suspicious if you have one phone and you use it all the time to make phone calls to your family, with your employer, with your regular contacts. And then all of a sudden, it's not difficult to find out that you use one other phone only for very few phone calls. And then, of course, if anyone who's monitoring, that would probably be most interested in those phone calls that are happening with a different SIM card or with a different phone. That always, I think, is important to also think of the context in which you are changing your behavior.
And just very quickly, just a little aside, I did notice that the last time I visited Turkey for work, I bought a pay-as-you-go SIM card, but I was told I could only use that SIM card for 10 days, and after 10 days, I would have to come back to the shop and have the IMEI code registered with the mobile phone provider. So yeah, it appears that it's going to be different regulations in different countries, but you might think just by buying a SIM card, off the street or just from a mobile phone shop, that you're having some degree of anonymity, but you might also be required to give this information away, or, as I found out during another trip to Georgia, you have to provide, your passport and all of your identification just to register to get a SIM card.
I think that's true in many countries, that it's difficult to get SIM cards without registering. At the same time, it's possible in many countries as well at little shops to get SIM cards that don't ask for this type of information. I haven't heard about Turkey that you can use it for 10 days and after 10 days and then you have to register. That's quite interesting, I find. I think it's important to keep in mind that when you get a new SIM card to use in a different country, as soon as you pop that into a phone that you're using anyways, it is then connected to the hardware registration. If you, for example, paid with your credit card for the phone, like the device that you are using, then this device is connected to your name and your financial information. And if you buy a new SIM card and put this in there, it's not difficult to understand that it's you who is using this new SIM card now, even though you may not have had to register that when you bought it. Okay, so this is what I meant to show about the IMEI, and you can find a bit about what you just said about paying with credit cards and other forms of financial means or cards down here, and there's more to find out about that. The next thing that I would like to go to, let me see, we already half through the time, so we need to move on a little bit. Always good to remember and important to keep in mind when using phones. Now I'm checking off, assuming that many of us are using an Android phone, others probably an iPhone, which is right down here. There's a lot of information that comes with using or how you use your phone, what operating system you have on it, assuming it is a phone that has an operating system of that kind. And many of the applications that are either pre-installed or you install later on smartphones request access to your geolocation. I don't know how many of our users now actually look at the license agreements that you have to accept once you install a new application. I would be lying if I said that I've always read everything that has been displayed for me before I install something, but I think it is good practice to at least have a look at what type of information the app requests from you, and often geolocation is part of that. And what geolocation means, and let me just click that, is that your phone registers and keeps the information of where you actually are. It's using the GPS that is part of your phone. And this is something that you can turn on or you can turn off. It's very handy to use, for example, if you use, again, Google Maps or any other kind of navigation software that helps you find your way. It's useful to have that turned on if you don't know where you are and want to get somewhere quickly, but often it's not necessary to have the excuse me, to have the geolocation feature turned on, because basically you walk around with a tracking device that constantly transmits information about where you are, and you don't always need that.
So geolocation, use with caution.
Geolocation definitely with precaution, and also if you install apps that request this information, I think it's worthwhile to excuse me, to think twice about whether some app that gives you information about whatever the price of gasoline absolutely needs to know where you are at this point. It's not necessary, and then there's some apps that we don't really need, that we just look at because they're fun, or a friend told us we should be looking at that. Is it really necessary that we really install that and, for example, have access to our address book and all our contact information and send that to some server that we don't know exactly where it is and who has access to it?
And this is certainly very interesting, because you're talking about how you actually what to really think about when you're setting up your phone. Being careful about the geolocation, or if particular apps are actually asking you to share contacts, as well as engage location services. I think, dare I ask, one of the most popular messaging apps cross-platform is WhatsApp. Just without the name giving you a coughing fit, but what's your just brief assessment of something like that?
Good that you're mentioning it, because I was going to actually talk about WhatsApp myself, because it is such a popular software, and it is actually quite handy, because it's really the only, as far as I know, the only messaging service that works across platforms, which is what makes it so attractive, and it's so easy to use. The downside of that is that WhatsApp asks to access, just like I just described, your address book and all your contact information, meaning by accepting WhatsApp on your phone, you're basically handing over everybody's names and addresses and phone numbers and whatever else you have in your address book, and send that to the WhatsApp service. that's how it works and why that's so convenient to use. But on the other hand, it means that not only are you giving away your own information and address and phone number and maybe birthday and I don't know what, but also everybody else's. And I think that's a serious data protection problem. Personally, I would go as far as to say I think that should be illegal, at least following the European data protection laws. And I do think those could even be stricter from my point of view, but are quite okay when it comes to that. And I'm personally I'm asking my friends to either erase my phone number and name from their address books, or else to please not use WhatsApp, because I would rather personally decide myself who I give my information to.
I think with WhatsApp, really the debate has only centered about encryption of the messages that's being passed in your network, and probably it's been overlooked that straight away from opening it up, yes, you do share your contacts with WhatsApp from the very beginning.
Exactly. I mean, I have downloaded the app myself because I like to use different apps. I like working with different forms of communication, and so I try out these things also because, of course, I research what they do. And once I downloaded WhatsApp and tried to install it, the first question it was saying, okay, to install this app, you need to have it access these many things, and the first thing was contact all your contacts, and that's when I stopped installing, because, and again, I think you should look at the license agreements of things and actually think whether you would like to accept them.
And just so we can cover off a quick question on mobile before you move on, we've had a question here from Marco about I think Marco's talking about Android paranoid.
Android? Let me see that question. I can't find that. Where is that?
If you have a look at in the presenter notes there, can you see the question from Marco? If I switched to my paranoid mode, which is quite useful for thinking about anonymity in digital communication, I try to avoid direct communication.
It would be good to maybe give a bit of context on what is meant by the paranoid mode now.
I can only assume that he was referring to maybe the app Android paranoid.
That is not something I'm familiar with. I have to say I was understanding this, that maybe if Marco goes into his personal mode of being paranoid, but maybe Marco would have to explain that to us.
Okay, Marco's just giving us a bit more information there. It's not just my personal paranoid mode, not a technical one. Okay, all right. So, okay.
And then he was asking.
Clarification, Marco.
And then he was asking about more sophisticated means of anonymizing your communication, such as Tails and Tor. This actually here these are both software or toolkits that I advise if you seriously want to completely anonymize your communication. Very, very good software that I would strongly advise to use if you really want to anonymize any form of communication. Maybe if we have the time, we could come back to that more towards the end and stay with the more simple forms of tracking and tracing your fingerprint before we get to that. I would, in fact, if there's not other questions, which I can't see at the moment, add one more piece of information about the geolocation, and how that matters. Together with and actually matters for the phones that we use, and I think specifically for journalists also, again, this plays a role. Geolocation generally is a piece of metadata, and we know metadata recently as being the information that comes along with communication. For example, we've heard a lot about the metadata of email, and how that gives away a lot more than the content of the email. Metadata being the invisible information of who is sending something to whom and at what time and where from. And there's also another form of metadata, which is information that is hidden in different files. For example, if we take a picture with our smartphone and send that to a Flickr page or to Facebook, or even just as an attachment somewhere, very likely this picture is going to have a lot of metadata, which include what the camera is that we use it for. And if the geolocation feature of your phone is turned on, it will also include information about where you were when you took the photo and when you took the photo. And so, for example, if you take pictures saying you were in Turkey and you were watching the whole Gezi Park demonstrations, it might be very interesting for the Turkish authorities to understand on which day and exactly in what place you took a certain picture that you later uploaded wherever, showing a certain face of someone who they were actually looking for, trying to prove he was at this place at that time. So I think it's really important to understand that this information is in the pictures unless you take it out. There is different kinds of software, and we can see this down here. I think you can still see the screen. The image metadata stripper is one of those that helps you delete all this additional information. And I think this is something that should certainly be done, especially if you have the geolocation feature turned on before you upload pictures from your smartphone.
And I mean, this is very important, particularly for protecting people who might be in images or people who are taking the images, but professional photographers might be, let me say, maybe hesitant in stripping a lot of metadata from their images simply because they want to make sure that the ownership of the image remains with them, and you know, they find that type of metadata very useful in their work.
Oh, absolutely. I think professional photographers have a means in general to actually use editors for their metadata and actually looking at what kind of metadata they have in there, and then one by one changing or adding their photographer credits and the detailed information about who they are and how they want to be credited when the picture is used, etc., etc. That's fine. I mean, there is no need to not have any metadata in pictures, but again, if we're on a bit less professional level and we, for example, want to make sure that someone cannot be identified who's in a picture that is uploaded straight away, that's a different type of metadata, and we should make sure that this is not uploaded.
Okay, and what's next that you've got for us?
Just quickly close this. Wait. Again, I invite you to go through these and choose the kind of phone that you're using. What I'd like to go to next is the section online services. What's the internet browser if we have no services that we use it? And here we get actually to the option that we are using Google services. I think most of us probably use Google in one way or another. There's the search, there's the maps, there's the calendar, there's Google Talk, and many other things that you can use a Google account for. And it's, I think, not really news that of course leaves a lot of traces, and that Google provides these services for free or seemingly for free, because there's a great business model behind that, which lives off collecting a lot of your data. And it's not easy all the time to find a good alternative, specifically if you, for example, need an online calendar that allows you to share events maybe with your team, maybe if you're not all in the same spot. But I think it's at the same time also a good idea to realize that this is not private, even if the setting is that it cannot be accessed by everyone and in public. But whatever you type in there is giving away information about the people that you're sharing the information with, or the email is being read and monitored, is something I think that most people know by now as well. And I think Google does have a pretty robust architecture, which can be useful, for example, coming back to the discussion we had on Monday, if you're an activist in Bahrain and you're being monitored by the Bahrain government, maybe using Google is an option that's better than using a local provider, which for certain cooperates with the government. But in most cases, I would advise against having any kind of sensitive information in any kind of Google service, because as we know, this information goes directly to Utah and the service of the NSA. Apart from that, the Google business model works through placing targeted advertisement at you, which means they're collecting as much information about who you are and what you like and what your preferences are, and then place advertisements on your websites or in your Google services that actually know quite a lot about you. And this happens within Google, but of course also happens everywhere in the commercial web, whether you use Facebook or surf to different websites. And the one tool that I wanted to actually show you down here is called Ghostery. And Ghostery is something that it's a browser add-on that helps you understand which ad networks are actually trying to track your behavior while you browse. And that's one that we pre-installed before we started the session. And if you do install it and you see the information down here, this is the website where you can find it. You can use it best with a Firefox or a Chrome web browser. And here's some additional information. It's not tricky to install, I would say. The installation is really simple. And then the use is something that I would like to show you. I thought we could, if we look at the top right corner over here, you see a little blue ghost, which is the symbol for Ghostery in action. And I think that can be shown really well if we go to a website that actually has a lot of advertisement. And as an example, I picked the New York Times website over here. And once we go to the New York Times website, you can see that little ghost before it had a 1, meaning there's one tracker on this website. And if you go to the New York Times, that switches to 13. And if you hover with your mouse over the little ghost, it says view Ghostery's findings. So if I click here, I can see all the tracking things that are embedded in the New York Times that are trying to know what I'm looking at and what I do. And you can see there's quite a lot. There's Facebook Connect, which is something we know. There is advertising, media mind, mode advertising, net ratings, analytics, beacons by the New York Times itself, etc., etc. And what's so nice about Ghostery is that you can turn them off one by one.
So not only can you actually visualize what's happening with your data from your browser, you can actually disable specific what would you call them?
Trackers. Basically, these are companies that are placing little invisible pieces of data either through cookies or through so-called web beacons, which are almost or invisible little beacons that collect information about you once you surf to that website. And there's different other the widgets. If you want to know more in detail, you can also click on these, and it will give you a bit more information about the different tracker actually by this, and there's actually 4, and then you could go there and look at those more in detail, which we don't want to do at the moment maybe. Just one more thing, you can turn them on and off, and you can also permanently either allow or not allow something on the website for the New York Times. So if you start using Ghostery in the beginning, you're going to find a lot of these things that will probably help you realize how much tracking is actually happening. And if you permanently turn specific trackers off, you will have more of these permanently to the right and see how much tracking Ghostery actually helps you to prevent. And then there's some more additional information over here. Ghostery actually has a pretty big database and website that you can access then and look more in detail. What is this? What kind of analytics? Is it an external third party, or is it just the analytics that the New York Times is using to understand who's using their website? So you can find out this information by going through these in detail. It's not something I would like to spend an hour with every day, but every now and then I find this quite informative. Has to be said, though, that Ghostery is really popular, but Ghostery also is owned by a company that actually in itself is also an advertising company. It does have a very good reputation as a very well working add-on, but it has this little doubt about it. Why does Evidon, which is the company that owns Ghostery, which is an advertising company, produce and run and provide an add-on for free that helps people get rid of trackers if it's an advertising company in itself? We do not have a very good alternative to this, so I still I would say it's something people should use, but it's good to understand that there's this other end to it.
And just a quick question there from Volta, who's saying, but some people would say, what's the problem? I've got nothing to hide. What do you say to that?
Well, that was a big question. To begin with, I think I tried to explain that a bit earlier. Personally, I feel uncomfortable with knowing that there's companies who I don't even know who they are and why they are doing this in detail, who are keeping a profile about me, who know my name, my birthday, my address, my kids' names, that I like to look at red shoes and that I like to spend my vacation in Italy and so many more details about me. That is something that I would prefer to be able to control myself, who has access to all this knowledge about me. I don't walk over to strangers in the street and hand over my address book and give them my ID card and have them look at all of that, even though I think it's none of their business. So why should I want to hand over this kind of information to some company who wants to sell this information? I think there's many of us who have good reasons to want to keep some privacy, either for professional reasons. Again, this program is called Digital Security for Journalists. I think journalists have good reason to maybe sometimes not want to share what they're researching and who they're talking to, and what they're talking to about to whom. Again, for reasons to protect sources. I think human rights defenders, for the same reason, have good reason to be afraid of their adversaries that can be governments in repressive regimes, but at the same time, activists that, for example, deal with environmental issues often have very strong adversaries in the companies that they're working around and have good reason again to hide something. So I think there's many good reasons why when we think twice, we have good reason to want to hide something.
And we've just got 2 minutes left in our session, so we have covered quite a bit. Is there any final points that you would like to make to sort of neatly conclude your contribution in our workshop?
Maybe if I may, I would like to go back to the not the Trace My Shadow, but the Shadow Tracers Kit, which is actually I opened that in a different tab. Now we're here in the Shadow Tracers Kit, which is a collection of the tools that we have and that we have tested and investigated and would advise people to use. So I invite you all to have a look at those. They're here collected in 3 tabs. Explore My Traces helps you understand what other people can find out about you and how easy it actually is to trace you and your digital footprint. Resize My Shadow helps you actually reduce the number of traces that you leave, and some of the ones that I mentioned you will find in this section. And then there's Turn the Tables, which is again a few tools that help you understand how easy it is for others specifically to find out information about you. There's really a lot, and I hope that this short introduction has given you a bit of an appetite to research a bit more and maybe spend 10 minutes a week already on just finding one tool that might help improve your privacy.
And maybe just something to maybe neatly wrap up, because I know you mentioned it earlier, and if we could just sneak in just some quick comments about it. Cookies, what do we need to know about them?
Cookies are little files that third parties and the websites that you serve to actually place on your computer to collect information about you and send it back home. And there's a number of add-ons that are very useful in trying to avoid cookies that I would like to advise you to use, which is AdBlock Plus, which is also in the Resize My Shadow section further down. And Better Privacy is one thing. AdBlock Plus is down here. Better Privacy protects you of a different kind of cookie, so-called Flash cookies that come with using Flash on your website, which you must have activated to be able to use the Adobe Connect. It's a different kind of tracking method. And then there's also one that I would like to specifically point out, which is No Script, which prevents scripts from also tracking specifically your browser fingerprint or even inserting malware into your computer. So these three are definitely tools that are very, very good to have active on your browser.
Anne Roth, thank you very much for your time this afternoon to speak with us. We've had, I think, some fantastic input from you, and thank you very much to everyone who has participated. We've had some great questions from you as well. Anne Roth from Tactical Technology Collective, tacticaltech.org, and the tools that she's been showing us are available on myshadow.org. Tomorrow we have another live session at the same time, 1500 CET. We'll have Holger Gierhoff in from Reporters Without Borders, Germany, and Holger's going to be talking with us about give us an overview on online spying on journalists. So we'll be looking at specifically the digital threats to journalists. So I very much hope you can join us then. There will be a video of today's session available later tonight that we will post on the Digital Safety for Journalists website. Please, you can stay in contact with us via Twitter, and also probably get in contact with Anne and her colleagues via Twitter as well. So we look forward to your company, and our thanks from Berlin for everyone for joining in, and particularly to the digital safety team for their assistance in producing today's workshop. We'll see you tomorrow, and goodbye from Berlin.
Thank you.